Hey, Andrew Hines here, and today's episode is featuring a guest named Kellan Paniccia. If I said that wrong, sorry, Kellen. Kellen is a real estate investor, and he's someone who has competently exercised use of the BRRRR method for the last 2.5 years to acquire 32 units and approximately $10,000 in cash flow. As our conversation will unfold, you'll hear basically how that all works. He shares lots of wisdom on how he manages to re-tenant properties, how he manages to find hidden gems both on and off the market, and his strategies for doing so. You're not going to want to miss this one. If you find this episode valuable, please share it with a friend so that we can help build the community around this podcast. One of the main reasons I started it was to connect with investors. Certainly would love it if you have not already. Go ahead and connect with me on Instagram. I am at the Andrew Hines, and my last name is spelled Hines. So without further ado, here's episode 10 with Kellan Paniccia. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have a special guest on the show today, Kellen. Kellen, could you please say your last name for me?
Paniccia, it's Italian.
Paniccia? Okay, I knew it was Italian. I didn't want to take a risk on that. So
Yeah.
Great, I like that name. Anyway, so Kellen is a real estate investor. I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but we can dig into 28, so still quite young. Working full-time job, but in the last couple of years, you've developed and built a pretty big portfolio of multi-residential units, which I know a lot of people are trying to do. And you've had these creative approaches where you've been able to find deals where other people aren't finding them. So really happy to have you on the show. Kellen, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. So I know you were at a real estate investing conference last night, Wind City Oric. Is that right?
Yeah. So Matt McKeever and Jeff Weibo have put on all sorts of these events, and and they put on one in Windsor this weekend, yesterday. So I was there it was like probably 17 or 18 hour day, and then 2 hour drive home, because we got there at like 9 a.m. and didn't leave till 2 a.m. So
My God.
it was a good time. Like, I'm usually the last person at any of these networking events. I find that's when you really develop relationships with people, and people really let their guard down because they're exhausted and everyone's just kind of hanging out. So that's my favorite way to network, is just like when everyone's worn out, but the people that are still sticking around, they really want to be there.
Yeah. You learn so much. Like, I remember that'd be 4 hour drive for me. So I was like on the fence with it. I'm like, no, too much each way. Yeah. So anyways, I love those events. I used to come down to London, even though it was, 3 hours of driving for me, just to do the monthly meetups when there used to be Lyric. Yeah. I used to do those meetings. So miss those. I would love to have something like that up where I am near Hamilton.
Yeah, Lyric was a good time. It's kind of like the old boys club, right? Like there were people that have been doing that for a long time, and it was funny. We came into that group, and it was just a bunch of young kids, basically like, we want to get over.
I remember coming. Yeah.
Right? Who are these kids? And then since then, I guess they've seen us kind of explode, and we've started up London on Fire and other meetup groups here in London. So kind of gotten a good group of people out.
It's such a big thing, right? Like, getting around people, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So the more time you can spend with people thinking like that.
It's like, it's getting to the point where it's cliche, but it's like absolutely true. It's kind of scary. If you spend time with negative people, you start thinking negatively. Mm-hmm. And if you spend time with people who are 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of you, then you think like them, and quickly you feel like you're not quite doing enough. And you start to have to figure out this mindset of, like, a good friend of mine, Mitch Pater, he's on Instagram. He talks about the idea of being grateful but never satisfied. I think that's the mindset that you really have to adopt with this, because you have to enjoy the process along the way. You can't just be thinking it'll be good when, because I always catch myself saying it'll be good when, right? When the next refinance comes in, or when the next project's done, or whatever. And it's like, you got to enjoy the process along the way.
Yeah, you're pretty much already there if you wanted to hang up the work gloves, I guess we'll say. Are you not?
Probably about a year ago, I reached financial independence. I don't have a very expensive lifestyle. Pretty basic, and I think I reached like the $3,000 or $4,000 a month or something at that time, and I've just kind of continued growing my portfolio since, because the main reason is I work a full-time job. Now is the best time to qualify for mortgages.
Yeah.
and I want to just maximize on that, right, and stretch it and push it as far as I can. So it's just been about getting as many mortgages as I can while I have the job.
No, that makes perfect sense. And so you were a year in at, haven't you only been doing this like 2 years?
2.5 years as of this month. Yeah. So
So
yeah.
2.5 years in, at a year and a half in, you were already at about $4,000 in cash flow.
Yeah,
And
I have 5 properties, 15 units after 1 year, and then grew up to now the 10 properties, 32 units. So
32 units, ballpark cash flow on that, if you want.
um,
You don't have to share.
feels like a personal question, to be
Don't
honest. But
share if
yeah,
you don't want.
I think like when I get my portfolio up and running, right now, it'll be closing in on the 10K a month in like passive, like that's after I budget about $250 a month at least per property in maintenance alone,
Yeah.
and there's a vacancy budget as well. So pretty conservative in terms of those numbers. I think over the portfolio, I'm budgeting like 25,000 a year just in
Right.
maintenance. So yeah, it's way more than I ever need because I live a very frugal lifestyle, and yeah, I just kind of want to be like the hippie in a van that's like making a little more than he needs. But I'm gonna try and use it for good things. I don't know what that means yet. People think that when they stop spending money, that means they're going to be less happy. And I think that they've made a grave mistake in connecting those two things, right? They think there's that spending money is making them happier. It makes you short term happy, right?
Yeah.
It's chasing the highs. And like if you associate money with happiness that strongly, then you're just chasing short term highs. Like long term happiness comes from relationships, getting together for playing board games with friends, like going on hikes, being outside, that kind of stuff, like family, like those are the things that really make you happy. And
Yeah.
then
Doing your passion too, right? Like whatever.
exactly, whatever you like, and I don't like hobbies is such a boring word, but like whatever excites you, right? Whatever you love spending your time doing, that's what makes you happy. It's not about buying the nicest car or anything like that. Like you're gonna be happy if you buy a Mustang or whatever you want. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
be happy with it for the first year, and then that's your new norm. You start adapting. It's
And it doesn't
hedonic
change anything,
adaptation.
right? It doesn't change anything. Yeah.
That's your new baseline, right? Now you need that Mustang to be baseline happy.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you kind of just set your life up in a way that it kind of satisfies your needs, and then you focus on your freedoms, right? Like all the freedom, the free time, and that's where you can really get creative.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people like I had a guy on the show yesterday, and I asked him what his favorite hobby was, and he's like, I don't really have a hobby. I just love working. Like I love like crushing deals. And
Yeah.
funny when you're like that, your hobby is actually making you money, which I think in a lot of cases that is the win.
Yeah. I
So
spent
that's
like I spent like I went to university and did a computer science degree. I'm still working part time in a master's degree, even though it's not absolutely not my passion. It's just sunk cost fallacy at this point. But
mhm,
I spent all this time thinking I was a procrastinator because I was always taking forever to finish assignments or like at work, I would always feel like I'm procrastinating on projects, and it's just everything was a grind, right? But as soon as I got into real estate investing, I realized I'm a really hard worker, and the only missing link was that I wasn't doing what I enjoyed. As soon as
right.
I was doing something I enjoyed, or that gave me good positive feedback loop, I worked harder than a lot of people do, and it was just because I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't I was no longer a procrastinator overnight.
Yeah, that's so true for me too. I know when I so many things I tried, ventures, in the mortgage business and stuff. Like I never really wanted to go out and just like crush that extra sale. Like it didn't motivate me. But I remember my first renovation project where I bought the house and I renovated it, and I was turning it into a high-end student rental.
Yeah.
And I was just so convicted in what I was doing. I was down, I was commuting back and forth to London, sleeping in the house like when it was unfinished, and I
Wow.
didn't mind. I was there. I was happy to be there until late at night. I'd work after everybody went home. It was just, to me, I was so convicted in what I was doing. It was so interesting to me that it
Yeah.
didn't matter, right? And I think everyone can get there, but they just kind of got to. I think one of the first steps is to adjust your life so that you're not wasting money and forcing yourself into working a job or working in a way that you're unhappy, and
Yeah.
then the rest can flow from there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think like it even comes down to the basic law of incentives. Like we actually are incentivized for our businesses to succeed. So
Yeah.
you probably didn't necessarily enjoy doing the renovations. If you didn't make money doing it, maybe it would be kind of boring. But like,
No,
or
it's the thrill though. It was all the process, right?
right?
Yeah.
But you actually like the incentives in the right place because you know that that's going to make you money in the long run,
Yeah.
and therefore you're excited to do it. So I think it's
Yep.
just about, when you're working for somebody else, the incentive is not there. You're working hard to grow it,
Mhm.
to grow somebody else's business. But when it's
Right.
your own, all of a sudden, you want to work that much harder. It's easy.
So what's your thought with all of this? You're in a position where you don't need to work. I know you're taking advantage of the mortgage qualifications for the moment. Um, I take it you're working in a computer oriented position.
Yes, I work in the software industry, so I work with a team of developers, like software developers and software QA people, and I manage the software QA people. So I've been in that industry I've been in my current job for 3.5 years, and before that, I worked for Cisco for a few years. So I graduated in 2012, and I've spent the first 5 years or so just saving up, like living frugally and saving up, and I started with about 120 grand of just money that I saved just from working, and then took that money and started investing in real estate. And the
Wow.
goal was financial independence. So the goal was to just get to that point where my passive, with real estate, and
Yeah, it's not completely passive, right?
not currently. I think there are ways to make it like more passive, but right now it's definitely an active business for me, like a part-time thing, right? But the goal was financial independence so that I could have enough passive income coming in every month to sustain my lifestyle. And when I reached that point, I thought, okay, I've got some good momentum. I may as well keep it up. And like it only been a year, so I was like, I've got some systems down. Let's just keep repeating this process that's working. And I've done that. I've kind of started to bump up with that limit in terms of like my debt service ratio. Well, my debt service ratios are fine, but just banks are a little harder on you when you've got the 10 properties and you're trying to get more lender financing, personally owned like properties.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to bump into that, but also starting to bump into like, well, I feel like I'm selling my time when I'm at work. I feel like I'm sitting there and I'm like, here's 8 hours of my life
Mhm.
for, a few hundred bucks or whatever it is. Right. And I don't know, that's like my life and my time are so much more valuable to me than that.
Right.
So I don't want to just hand over my time for money anymore. I want to be spending my time doing what I want. And so there's probably going to be a big change coming up soon in my life. And I am hoping to do like a big van trip this summer for like 3 months and stuff. So hoping to
Interesting.
free up some time.
Van trip. Where are you going to go?
Well, we're thinking about doing my girlfriend and her dog and I. We're going to get a van and drive around the states, like 32 states. We're going to basically circle it and live in a van and just explore and go to all the national parks and check out the cities. And there's a lot of places in the states I haven't been. We're probably going to spend a good amount of time on the West Coast when we get there. So
Yeah.
that's crossing my fingers right now. That's the goal, to kind of pull the trigger on some things and go on a trip like that.
Nice. Actually, you should listen to episode 2 because
Yeah.
Jake Campodero was on the show and he actually did that. Him and his buddy.
Oh, I need to.
They circled around the U.S. They slept in their van. They built a bed into their van and they slept in Walmart parking lots. And like they spent like no money, traveled the
That's
whole
amazing.
circumference of the U.S.
I will listen to it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it's
awesome.
funny that you say that. It's like the exact same vision. They started in Vancouver. They went all the way down to Key West, Florida, like down through California, and then over across. And
How long did they take?
they took about a month. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we've got 3, so I'm hoping to be able to take our time and like check out, like spend some time in these cities. And like when you're traveling, sometimes you only have like half a day or a day in a city, and it's nice to just spend a few days, get to know each city, right? And like, I think for me, the purpose of the trip is really, a lot of people ask me what's next and try to figure out like, what is the plan now? Like, and I have no clue. I figured out a system where I can make money, but there's a lot more life than that for me. So I'm trying to figure out really my purpose, or like what I enjoy doing, or what I want to spend my time doing. And I think this trip is going to be my soul searching time. I think I'm going to be listening to a bunch of podcasts, and I'm going to be listening to audiobooks and just spending time with people, and spending a lot of time thinking. And I'm hoping to come back with a clearer purpose, because I've never taken more than a week off of work. So this is going to be out of my comfort zone.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, that's going to definitely be a little shock to the system, having all that free time. I haven't worked. Well, I worked. I used to teach at Western actually. I taught after I graduated, but that was the last job I ever had, and everything else has been self-employed. So it's always been kind of
Wow.
up to me to like make it up and like when am I going to work? When am I not going to? Which is definitely a struggle, right? Like to
Wow.
restrict yourself personally and say these are the hours I work,
Yeah.
which
What was the
usually
reason
ends
for
up.
you? I don't know if you've ever talked about it on your podcast at all, but what was the reason you wanted to stop teaching and do this all self-employed?
Well, you know what? It's just this funny thing for me. Like I like a challenge. Like for me, I get bored. If I do the same thing all the time, I just get bored, right? I taught 2008 to 2010. It was a 2-year contract and I loved it. It was like I just graduated school and it was this really cool thing where I actually got to teach at the university I went to.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
yeah, for first year business, really fun course. I always liked entrepreneurship because I saw these people being creative, creating things, and I was teaching about that. But then I went back. I got a call from my old boss, and she's like, "Yeah, we actually had somebody drop out this year. We need somebody to come fill 4 sections." And I had been missing it because I was kind of doing I was doing a really sales heavy mortgage job, which I wasn't really enjoying that much. And I'm like, oh wow, like yeah, I remember how happy that was. But then
yeah.
when I got back and I did it again, I realized, you know what? I've already done this. I want to do something new and different and kind of grow. And I don't regret going back because when I went back, I actually moved back to London. And that was when my investing went on steroids. Like I started buying, renoing, refinancing as much as I could, growing my portfolio that way. Because I didn't come in with 120 grand to invest. I think my first 2 properties I had like 50 grand of my own money in between the two
Yeah.
of them. And then after that, I haven't really ever put my own money in. I've just creatively leveraged what I had. So for me, I just never been very good at kind of listening to people say, hey, you got to do this, you got to show up at this time. In fact, the very notion when somebody tells me I have to do something like kind of boils my blood.
I think that's like the
Yeah.
common theme amongst entrepreneurs is
Yeah.
it's just people wanting to have control over their lives.
Right.
Like it's not fun working for someone else's vision, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to be passionate about it. You're not going to enjoy work because you don't want to spend your time doing that. You want to be spending your time doing something that you're incentivized. You're going to see benefit in your own life through that hard work.
Definitely, I think as an entrepreneur, yes, absolutely. I think there are some people out there that just love what they do anyway, though, even
True.
though maybe they get on board with the company's vision, right? Like, their company is just really good hearted and they focus on helping people. And I've seen that too.
A
Uh,
lot of healthcare people, right? Like
yeah,
people in the healthcare industry seem to really like they're passionate about their work. And like there are, software developers that just love to code. They just want to code and then they want to go
yes.
home and do what they're doing in the evening. And like, yeah, there are definitely people who and that's not and there is a little bit too much of the talking down about the day job thing.
Mhm.
And like we talk with the of enjoying the process and
Yeah.
man, you can enjoy your job and that's like part of your process or that's your and that's and that, or you're actually happy with that and continuing it forever. Like that's amazing, right? Like at
Oh,
the end
yeah.
of the day, it's just a lot of people don't like their job, and those are the people who want to
Yeah.
escape. And the people who like their job and they don't have anything to escape from, they can enjoy
Yeah.
their days.
As Gary Vee says, if you're looking forward to Friday, then your shit is broken.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the real test. Are you looking forward to Friday? Because if you're not, then you're on the right track probably.
yeah. No, I feel regret every Friday when I see him make those posts. I'm just like, yeah, I do love Fridays.
Yeah, but hey, it's a process, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't happen overnight, and I would never recommend to anybody who's thinking about getting into real estate investing to just stop their job. I
yeah,
think it's critical to maintain that job as a tool, even though
yeah.
it might be biting the bullet for a little while. You can JV, you can do things, but until you get some progress and some positive feedback, like as you said, it's probably a little risky, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, people are quitting. People are quitting a little too soon. It seems. I mean, like, I, I think like the goal for a lot of people is to quit their job, but I don't know. Like, I'd say milk it. I'd say like milk it for a bit. How you might have to grind a little bit and take a little bit longer than you
Yeah.
want, but like get it to the point where your systems are in place. You're like you have a very comfortable income coming through. At which point, switch over to entrepreneurship, switch over to self-employment, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's assuming you have a half decent paying job. If you're working at minimum wage or something, and you can make and I would say, I would say when your passive income at least meets what you're making at your day job, at that point you could maybe switch over. But the nice thing is, if you've reached that point, now you're basically making twice the income you were making before. So you've got some massive momentum. So even
Yeah.
at that point, if you can stick it out for a little bit longer, you're going to grow pretty quickly, right? Like when you quit your job, you're now going to cut your income in half. And if your plan is to continue growing, it's going to be a little bit
Yeah.
harder without the income.
Do you get that thrill of the deal? Like, do you want to go to the next level and get up to 100 units just for the thrill of doing it?
I no, because I want to be intentional with my decisions, and right now I don't. People talk about like very basic concept of like how do you get where you want to going? Well, you figure out what you want, and then you set goals, and then you take steps toward it, and you reverse engineer it, right? I've never been able to get past step one. I think right from episode 1 of our own podcast, they said like, I don't know what I want. And I think I need to figure out what step one is.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can take it. And I think that's the hard part. Once you figure that out, setting the goals and reverse engineering and working hard to take the steps toward it, that I think that'll be the easy part. Figuring out what I want is the challenge. And I haven't been able to figure that out. Like I said, financial independence was my goal, but like, realistically now, I'm not really sure. I think that there's like definitely gonna be a social aspect to my life that I want. There's gonna be some, I want to go on adventures and feel and be active. I want to be able to. I like teaching people, so I want to do more of that. So like, I might lean into more of our meetups and our podcasts, and spend more time on that. Maybe get a YouTube channel going, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I think a lot of people are kidding themselves when they say like, like this is my goal, because a lot of times it's just a number, and like that's not really a life goal, right? Like making a certain amount of money isn't your goal, really. That's just like, I don't know, it's just a number, right? So I think that's been my struggle. That's been my struggle.
I can definitely relate to that, and I struggle with that all throughout my 20s, like figuring out like the goal setting thing. People said, okay, set your clear goal and then work towards it, get obsessed with it. I'm like, but what's the goal? Like, to me, it's not like there was one specific thing that I was willing to commit to and say, that's what I want for my life, because that feels so committed, right? What if tomorrow I wake up and I don't feel that way? I think goals are so essential because they're what drive us when shit gets hard. That's when we buckle down and we fight through it, because we're so determined to achieve our goal. Now, if your goal is to just feel that feeling of wake up and like, what do I want to do today? You know what? It's totally cool whether I do nothing or whether I start something like a YouTube channel or what have you.
Yeah.
And that really started to drive me. But I find that what helps more is just pick one thing, one vision of one thing, even if I only want to do it for a month or a couple of days, or even just take your trip, just imagining what it would be like to go on your trip. I think that draws you in the right direction, right? If you're thinking law of attraction, which I think a lot of investors and entrepreneurs understand that that's a real thing. And, you program your brain to go towards something. And I think that we need to all do that, especially in the real estate game, because it is a long process.
Yeah. So is that like for yourself? You said you struggled with that throughout your 20s. Did you end up figuring out this is my big goal? Or did you say, it turns out I want to set a series of goals right now? It was like, this is what I want to work on. So that's what I'm going to work on.
Yeah. I started to feel a lot more comfortable with just telling people the feeling of just knowing that I can do whatever I want today.
Yeah.
It's great, right? If it's
that.
If it's sunny and I want to go just sit in the hot tub at 1 p.m. in the afternoon on a Tuesday, I will do that. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel a little cold. I got a hot tub in the back. Just, okay, we're going outside. The dog comes and sits next to me, and
that's awesome.
That freedom. And then at the same time, like there are many nights where I'll work till 10 p.m., and but I'm into it, like whether it's getting a podcast episode out or whether it's trying to find the next deal or, getting stuff arranged for my rental properties. Being honest, I don't really enjoy the operation side of my rental properties. I don't think anyone really does. There are certain parts of it where I'm like, yeah, I got this. When I come up with a new process, or I switched every doorknob on all my properties to key codes.
Oh, me too.
Pads. So I'm like, key's gone. I got this really cool like key punch set to organize all the keys for bedrooms, because I have those.
Oh yeah, where you
bedroom 1, B1, B2. So like I geek out about that stuff. So I like that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
Those things are fun to me. And then of course finding a deal. I definitely feel like I have a lot of progress to make, because I kind of got stuck on one direction where I was doing student rentals, and they're high end. So there's a huge upside in terms of equity.
Right.
The cash flow, because I'm so heavily invested into them in time, and then they're highly leveraged, it's not as much as you've been able to earn on your multifamilies. So I feel
Right.
like I probably needed a little bit more networking and kind of brainstorming than I've done to kind of get outside of my own box and say, okay, there's more ways to do it than just what I've been doing.
I think like, yeah, I think the grass is always greener, right? When you talk about that, and I'm picturing you have these beautiful luxury like student rentals that are like have absurd amount of rents per bedroom and stuff. It's like that makes me drool, right? It's like that sounds amazing, and you're building this massive equity. It's like that's so cool, and like, but the grass is always greener, right? Like there's just pros and cons to each investing strategy, and
Yeah.
like even when I was at this event this weekend, it was like a panel of people talking about what they do when they're investing in
Mhm.
Windsor. And they're like, student rentals, multifamily, like here's me over in Chatham doing my thing with like,
Yeah.
duplexes. And it's like, there's a million ways, like self-storage and stuff. And
Yeah.
like your brain's going and you're like, there's a million different ways to make money. And like, I think it's okay to pick one, get
Yeah.
really good at it. If it's working and you're making money, like
Mhm.
just keep doing it. But if something new catches on, you're like, I want to give that a shot. And like you said,
Yeah.
wake up in the morning and you decide this is what I want to do today. If that now means self storage or chasing more
Yeah.
cash flow or trying some new strategy, like you have the freedom to do that.
That's the well, that's the thing, right? Like if it's enjoyable. I just did my first multifamily. Like I did a conversion. I took a single family house and then I built a 920 square foot
I
addition in the
saw,
backyard.
yeah,
Yeah, so I finished that. It's probably the nicest secondary unit in London right now that was just created. I mean, it's brand new construction. So
that's so
uh,
cool.
really fun project. I wanted to make it the nicest. I wanted to test what was possible for rent. So I got 1595 on that
Wow.
plus utilities, which now I realize it rented 3 weeks before I was even done. Like we were still like installing the kitchen and stuff, and it was
Yeah,
dirty. If I had waited, I probably could have pushed that even another $100
yeah.
reasonably. So, live and
Wow.
learn. But every $100 I can increase that property. I've said this before. That's probably at least 25 grand in extra value. If I can
Yeah,
get an extra $100 on that unit. So
yeah.
hanging on to that one for now. The original intent was to sell it, but I just looked at the numbers and I'm like, no, no, I'm not gonna. It's not gonna justify. I'm not gonna pull enough out of that if I sell it. I'd rather hang
Yeah.
on, knowing what's happening in the London market, and just wait.
Oh yeah, just hold. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to be said for taking what you have and optimizing it, right? And doing those things like add-ons or just figuring out ways to maybe furnish it and then get higher
Yeah.
rents with like a long-term executive rental or Airbnb. Like
Hmm.
just taking your asset and bringing it to its highest and best use.
Yeah.
Increasing the income, kind of finding ways to reduce the expenses, and just you're like, especially at scale, right? When you get a chunk of properties and you can do this at each of them, you could just spend a couple months working on that and you now have the equivalent of another property's worth of cash flow with fewer properties to think about. And in fact, the properties are probably in better shape now too. So like
Mhm.
there's a lot to be said for optimizing your portfolio. But at the
Absolutely.
same time, during the growth phase, I think there's a lot to be said for just buying as many properties as you can that are actually they have to make sure they're great deals.
Hmm.
But like, and then you have a backlog of things. So like,
Yeah.
say if you're going to want to quit
Yeah.
your job or whatever, you have a backlog of things that you can take these properties and improve them, right? So I've noticed over the last 6 months or year, I'm starting to go back. There's some turnover. There's some units that are kind of finally getting cleared out. I'm increasing cash flow in all these places, and I don't even necessarily need to buy more properties because I
You can
think
just
right now, like,
optimize.
right, I think my portfolio alone right now has probably got 2 or 3 grand of potential cash flow that I could unlock after some turnover and after I figure some things out.
Minimal investment to do that stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think like, if we're talking about the 1% rule and stuff, well, if you can spend 10 grand and now get another $100 a month in cash flow, that's your 1% rule still. I mean, it's the same thing. The only difference is you don't have the leverage on it. So I guess if you could do that right before a refinance, then it's the same thing as buying $100,000 property that rents for $1,000 a month. Um, you can spend 10 grand and get another 100 bucks a month in cash flow. And like, you
Yeah.
probably don't have to spend anywhere near 10 grand to get another $100 a month. So like, there's a
So
lot to be said for just taking what you've got and optimizing it.
Why don't you just dig into the 1% rule for those who aren't familiar
Sure.
with it and explain it?
Yeah. So like I said, $100,000 property should rent for $1,000 a month. It's just 1% of the property's value
Mhm.
per month in rent. Just a general rule of thumb. Definitely not a perfect thing, but like it's just it's a good way to it's a good baseline to start, and it's like been the key metric that I've been using for all my purchases. They always at least meet or exceed the 1% rule. And I
Really?
mean, a lot of times you tell your realtor, I'm looking for this rule, and they're like, you're not going to find that. And then you talk to a bunch of people in that same city that are buying at that rule. So there's a lot. It's it's a scary rule to approach as a new investor, but I think the main reason is people don't understand that it's not going to be sitting on the MLS. It's not going to be a $200,000 property that currently rents for $2,000 a month. It's going to be a property that's listed for 250,000, but it needs a bunch of work. Maybe you can get it for 200,000. You can put in 20 grand, and now it rents for 2,200 a month. And like you can figure out ways to make it the 1% rule after renovations.
Okay, very interesting. So, and also a good segue. So, give me an example of a property that you saw, where you saw it, how you saw it, and what you did to it, or what
Yeah.
what you thought you should do, and what you ended up doing.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my best burr because, well, actually, I have another one right now that might actually be better than it. But my second property ever, I bought it here in London on Horton Street, and it was a duplex. And this was in late 2016, early 2017. They were asking 155,000, which was really cheap actually. Like there's nothing else really that no duplexes sitting around for 155,000. But the reason was it literally had meth dealers in the rear unit. And then the front unit had an old lady that had been there for 20 years. Pretty classic scenario.
Were they cooking meth in there, or it was
Selling it. I don't
just
know if they
selling?
were making it in there, but they were at least distributing it.
Nice.
I know because after I bought the property and the new tenants moved in, they were getting knocks on the door all the time with people trying to buy. So it took a little while to change the stigma of that property.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the rear unit at the time rented for $500 or $600 a month. It was a 2-bedroom, and then the front unit rented for like same thing, like $600 or something. And it had the potential to be a 4-bedroom. So I ended up buying the place, and I requested that it be vacant on possession, kind of putting the burden on the seller. And so they ended up accepting the offer. They were asking 155,000. I went in at 109,000. They countered at 127, so right in the middle. And I kind of I got really excited because there was no one buying properties for 127,000, not big yellow brick properties like this. So
Nice.
I accepted it on the spot, even though I know maybe I could have negotiated a little lower. I didn't want this deal to slip away. And I've seen
It's a
it too
great
many
deal.
times. People get greedy, right?
So that was a market deal on the market.
On the MLS, it sat for about 2 or 3 months. Maybe I think 3 months it sat on the MLS. No one wanted it. There's
Why?
been a lot. I think almost all of my MLS deals, 5 of them might have been MLS, 5 have been private,
Okay.
and almost all of my MLS deals sat for at least 2 weeks, usually up to like 2 months, 3 months. At which point everyone's like, there must be something wrong with this property. And oftentimes there isn't, other than oftentimes there are things wrong with the property, but like the bones can still be good. So you got to deal with bad tenants, or you got to, I don't know, deal with things that smell or whatever. And so it sat for a while. I went in, I closed on it 127,000, and it was vacant. On the day I closed, no one was in it, and all the stuff was cleared out of it. It was incredible. So I ended up renovating that unit. I put in maybe 25% of the work myself, just because I wanted to get to know how this whole process works and
Right.
boots on the ground. So I was general labor and just kind of like in the property, painting and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It took a few months, and I ended up only spending 25 grand, including the new roof. Learned a lot of mistakes along the way. Definitely didn't do the greatest job in terms of renovations. Like looking back, it's not as good as my quality renovations these days, but it got it done. And I rented the front unit for 1,300 plus hydro, and the rear unit for 775 plus hydro. And then, what is it? I actually forget. I think I'm at 8 something. I don't know. I can't remember. 8 something now for the rear unit.
Is it just a bachelor or a one bed?
It's actually a 2-bedroom, but it's not in the greatest location. And one of the bedrooms is in the basement, and the bathroom's really small. So I couldn't really get top top rents for the 2-bed, and at this time it's definitely under market value, so I could probably rent it for closer to 1,000 these days, and the front unit could rent for probably 1,600 or so.
Wow.
We ended up, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. It cash flows super well, of course. The front unit, we ended up, so it only took 25 grand to renovate both units. We ended up making the front unit a 4-bed, and we added a bathroom, so it's a 4-bed 2-bath, and then the rear unit is a 2-bed 1-bath. So it cash flows super well. And like I said, bought it for 127, put in 25, so it was in for a little over 150, and it refinanced at 250. So I got all my down payment money out, all my renovation money out, and another large chunk of money, like whatever that, I forget what it worked out to be.
It's
but
80% they gave you, right?
80% loan to value on the, yeah. So
That's good. Yeah. Oh, you mentioned hydro. Hydro is just electric and water on the same bill for anyone who's listening from the state.
Yeah, hydro. It's like hydroelectricity, even though it's
hydroelectricity.
Water, it's electricity.
yeah, because most of our electricity does not come from water, but I guess they just combine it because they bill them on the same bill. Funny and weird and super confusing. I thought about that for years. I'm like, why did they call it that?
But yeah, that property's been one of my best burrs because like I said, I got all my money out, all my renovation and down payment money and a large chunk of money. So I had all my money back and more, and I was able to continue buying more properties. And I'd actually closed on that and another property on the same day. So properties 2 and 3 closed on the same day, 2 different lawyers.
Productive day. Two different lenders that didn't know about each other as well.
No, same lender actually. Same lender did both. Just I forget why I did 2 lawyers. I had a long close because in order to ask for vacant possession, I gave them like 80 days or something, right?
Yeah. That's an interesting one because legally they don't really have any way to make the tenant leave. It's just kind of, you just put it on them. Okay, you take care of it, find a way to make it happen. Even if it came down to just a handful of cash and say, if you go right now with a signature on this form, I'll sign it too. You're gone right now.
And that's exactly right. That is very, very common. Cash for keys, just handing the money, asking them to sign an N11 form or an N9 form in Ontario. Just a mutual agreement to end
vacancy, right? Or end tenancy.
Or ideally just an N9 form in Ontario, which is a notice that they want to move out. And that way there's no question. They've given you notice that they want to leave.
Now, the only thing with that is if you do the mutual one, you can skip the notice period, right? The mutual one can be sooner than...
I think, you're right. I think you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That was my take on it. I could be wrong. I'm no expert on the forms.
N11, you can pick a date. You mutually agree on a date. So an M9,
it could be today.
60 days notice, right?
Have you done this cash for keys thing? Because I think this is brilliant. And most people would never, like, it just like bothers them to their core. They just wouldn't do it.
I've done it a bunch of times.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Yeah. You hand the money and ask them to leave.
So how does the conversation go? Do we want to do a role play here?
Yeah. Okay, sure.
So I'm a tenant you want to leave.
It's a challenge because you can't say, hey, I'd like to renovate, or hey, I'd like to in any so when you're networking, you want to tell people and share and be a part of everything and share as much information as possible, and you want to be completely open. When you're in a negotiation, you have to change roles altogether, and now you have to share as little information as possible. So in this transaction, you're not going to tell them your plans. You're not going to do anything like that. You're just going to say, hey there, I'd like to have this unit vacant, or something of the sort, right? Like, I'm hoping that we can agree that you can move out. I have some plans for the unit, and if you're willing to, I'd be happy to give you $1,000 cash or whatever you want to pay them, $500 or $1,500. A lot of times the math is pretty simple. You figure out, you figure out what you're willing to pay, over the next 12 months based on the new rents and all that stuff, and you pay them. But yeah.
What number do you start with? Like, how do you determine what number is going to appeal to them? And do they come back at you and say, like, just some arbitrary number much higher? Or are they thrilled at the fact that you offered them $500?
Yeah, it depends on their like socioeconomic status probably. So like certain people $500 might be life changing. For certain people, $1,000 might be like, oh, okay, I guess that's my last month's rent on the next place. So yeah, it just kind of depends on their position.
Yeah. What type of like tenant have you? Like, you've probably had one that's in like $600 a month, and you can rent for $1,000, so you want them out, right?
Yeah.
What would their socioeconomic status have been? Do you have an example? Obviously, don't give any specifics of their name or anything, but
So one place I had, it had 3 bedrooms in it. One of the bedrooms, 2 of the bedrooms were rented by people who lived in it, and one of the bedrooms was just empty. And there was a tenant that had been on the lease, but just was never there and always paid rent anyway. So I'm
Hmm.
not really sure what the situation was there. Maybe he needed a mailing address for some ridiculous, some like social services scam or something. I really have no idea. But he they ended up saying we want to move out, or we want to get a roommate to replace this current tenant, and or to replace this current tenant who said he wanted to leave now, the one who never was living there anyway.
Hmm.
So I was like, I really don't want to rent this place by the room. Boarding houses aren't really legal, and I don't want to run the unit this way. It's not how I work as a landlord. So I'd like to be able to find an agreement where you guys would be willing to move out. And so so I approached them with, I'll give you each $500 if you're willing to move out on a certain day. I'd be happy to give you a good reference because these people actually were good tenants. Luckily, it was really under rented and the property needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, and they were interested and they were pretty much ready to sign, but I made the mistake of not bringing the paperwork with me. So by the time I went to them the next day, they had talked to their father. Their father was a lawyer, and his lawyer father was like, "Don't sign the paperwork. You don't need to leave." So I ended up waiting a bit, and they wanted to find a new tenant or a new roommate to sublet to.
Yeah.
They ended up getting a new roommate, and then they ended up not liking this new roommate, and then uh, eventually they decided they wanted to move out, and I didn't even have to end up paying them in this scenario. Um,
Isn't
but
that funny?
yeah, and I was laughing because I was like, I was ready to pay you guys $500. You didn't have to go through any of this process, and then they ended up leaving on their own terms with no money.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, generally I would say bring the form, whatever the form is where you are, get them to sign it on the spot and say like, you know, this form is to guarantee you that I'll give you, or like, how do you say it? You have to try and switch the mentality so that it's not like you're you're doing me a favor by signing this, but like this paper is to guarantee that you'll receive the $1,000 on on the day you move out or whatever, right? um, I
In
mean, ideally you can give it to them when they move out, but you could probably also just give it to them when they sign the form.
Yeah.
um,
I'd be inclined to give them half when they sign it and half when they actually leave,
yeah,
because they could just not leave too, right?
yeah,
Like I would just say, "Hey, look, guys, happy to do this for you here. Good faith. I'll give you this much now, and
yeah.
then the day you guys move out, I'll be here to collect the key and hand you the rest of it."
And I've done that as well. And like I'm actually in the process of that with a tenant right now. And they ended up not moving out by the time the day they said they were going to, because they well, for whatever, for their reasons. And I'm kind of I do think that they actually have intentions to move out, because they ended up moving all their furniture out, and they really looked like they were moving, but then ended up changing their mind because the
Yeah.
other property didn't have hot water apparently and all this stuff. So I think like it's a creative process. At the end of the day, I don't go into it forcefully, right? This is a mutual agreement. So go in there, talk to them like people. Think
Yes.
back to when you were a student. Which teachers did you enjoy speaking with? Was it the ones that talked down to you? Like, would you ever want to work with them, or would you just want to fight against them, right? Versus the teachers that kind of spoke to you like a person. This is the same thing with the landlord-tenant relationship. Talk to them like people. Like, let's find a way to work together on this. I'm happy to be flexible with you. I might even be able to help you find a different place. Maybe I could pay your moving fees because
Yep.
that's like a couple $100. Like, try to just figure out what their problem is and try and solve it. And it's the same process you apply when trying to find private deals or anything. Just like manage the relationship with people, and there's no black and white process. You just need to get to know them and figure out, how they work.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. And I've had a similar story where I had a couple of tenants that property management put into one of my units, a single family home, and they were under a 2-year lease. I didn't even know he did this, but then
Oh,
my fiance and I got engaged, and we're like, okay, well, we're going to need to pay for the wedding. So this property was one we owned together, and we kind of agreed it wasn't a good fit for our portfolio anyway. Like
yeah.
it didn't fit with what I was doing. So I decided, okay, that's a good candidate to be sold. And I went to the tenant and I just said, can I come, check out the place, talk to them. I'm like, hey, would you guys ever consider leaving? I didn't even tell them. I just like, I just laid it out for them. I'm like, I'm thinking about selling the place. I'm planning to. I've spoken with my realtor. He said that if I did, the best value is vacant. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so you'd be helping me out if you left. You don't have to, but the new owner might just ask you to leave anyway. So I'd rather give you guys the option, let you do it on your terms.
Yeah.
And that worked really well. Just talk to them like people, and just like you said, I think this is such a critical strategy because, as I've said so many times in this show, you add $100 in rent, you're adding $25,000 in value in our market. Now that varies market to market, but that's a good general rule.
Yeah.
So if you can even turn over a tenant and get $100 more, that's 25 grand in value that the bank now sees and will
Yeah.
lend you money against. So it's so critical to do this. And I think for me, looking at multifamilies, mismanaged multifamilies, that's in my head. That's been what I wanted to do for a long time. But I was always worried about, well, what if I can't get the bad tenants to leave in a timely
Yeah.
manner?
I think early on, your first few deals, it's going to be very important that you get them emptied out and re-rented and refinanced as soon as possible. There's a lot of properties I've bought since that there's tenants in there that I probably have close to 10 of my units that I'd love to turn over right now, but they're just not. People don't want to leave because the rent is double what it used to be. So
Yeah.
I'm a little worried that they'll be there for like forever. But
is it not worth it to you to just like once a week approach one unit at a time and just have that conversation with them and just plant the seed? I would like this unit vacant.
I
I do have some
planted the
plans.
seed with most of them, and a lot of them are just not reasonable about it, and they're not like, "Hey, I'm willing to pay $1,000 if you'd like to move out. I don't want to move out," and like,
So they just said, I don't want to leave.
I don't want to leave. Yeah, so I think like, I don't know. I think like later on when you have a decent little portfolio, it's okay to have those scenarios as long as the place still cash flows. Like I have a fiveplex and it's got 5 people in it and all of the units are under like half of market value. It still cash flows, and that's why I have a lot of potential cash flow there to unlock at some point. But no one wants to leave. I just know that long term, this is going to be a really good property to own. People are going to look back and be like, "How did you get it that cheap?" And it's because I bought it, when the rents were super low and there was a bunch of headaches, and I'm dealing with them now. But at some point, it's going to cash flow really well. So you just got to have patience with those properties.
Time cures all wounds with real estate. As long as you didn't sell. If you sold,
yeah. I did hear one pro tip recently was, figure out what you're willing to pay to get someone to move out. But then you could even consider paying them a certain amount every month for the next year, right? And say like, when you get to this, like, yeah, the rents are higher at other properties, but I'd be happy to give you like the last month's rent on the new place. And I'd be happy to give you, a few $100s every month for the next year. And like, that might sound like a lot of money, but if the property's rented for 600 or the unit's rented for 600 and it should be 1,000, that's totally worth it to get that turned over, right? Right.
If you can recoup what you paid them within a year, that's a 100% return on investment.
Yeah. And even if it takes a little longer, like
2 years, that's 50%. Still good.
At least your property's worth that much more now, and it's just running the way you want it to be, right? Like you're getting it set in that optimal position.
So do you think this is a situation that someone should fear, or is it something that someone should just stay persistent with?
I'd say early on, I would avoid it a little bit. Just, you don't want to buy a place where people don't want to leave and you're stuck with a negative cash flowing property. It's going to negatively affect your debt service ratios when qualifying for new mortgages. You're not going to be making any money. You're going to be losing money every month. It's going to be hard to build momentum.
So you need to have cash flow, but then you can work towards it. Yeah.
So I would say focus on getting these places vacant, especially early on. I would say like, you know how it is. We're willing to take on higher risk deals these days because we have the freedom to do so. We have some buffer in our portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
But like early on, it's kind of important to take on, nothing too risky, in my opinion. But at the same time,
where you're at, right?
Right. Yeah. At the same time, you could argue we're young. Like Gary Vee says, we're young. We can make mistakes, but I just wouldn't want to make any mistakes that are way too expensive, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just where people ask me like, would I invest in Toronto, or, do I think Toronto's a great place to invest? Like, absolutely. Toronto's a great place to invest if you absolutely don't care about negative cash flow. Like if that's just totally fine. And that fits in a portfolio where it's like someone such as yourself, where you're at that $10,000 mark anyway. If you shave 1,000 off to add something to your portfolio that's got huge upward potential in equity, if that's a decision you make, that makes sense because it's a very small percentage of your portfolio. But if you build a portfolio all around negative cash flowing properties, you're not going to be in the business long.
No. Yeah,
It's going to
exactly.
drive you insane. The stress of it, constantly seeing it lose money. It's just not a healthy position. Like
Yeah.
having a rental property pay you is a very special feeling. And every, the first of the month when my auto deposit goes in and I see like $10,000-$20,000 between all the property just dump
Yes.
into the accounts, like that's cool.
Yeah. And then the next day when all the mortgages come out.
Well, that's a little different, but it's just a great feeling, right? Like seeing that
Yes.
come in, and I think that's something that thrill. That's like the thrill of the deal that helps investors stay engaged and want to keep doing this. Want to go
Yeah.
get the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next part, I wanted to ask you, because we're in a very competitive market for property right now, seller's market, and you're still finding deals. And I know other people can relate, certain markets all around Canada, US. We even have some listeners in Australia, so they could relate too.
Nice.
If that's the situation you're in, like how are you finding deals? What are you doing to find these off-market deals that you're finding?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with on market because I'm still
Okay,
finding
sure.
MLS deals.
Okay.
Like recently, I bought a triplex for 148,000. It was sitting again on the MLS for a while. No one wanted it for some reason, and it's just because it had low rents, and I wanted to get it vacant. So in that scenario, I ended up saying, "Hey," to the owner, you're not willing to provide it vacant on possession as a condition, but can you just give notice anyway after we've firmed up? I'm not going to hold you liable to it, but I'd love if you'd actually give notice. And he gave some informal, like written but informal notice, not the proper form.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying the new landlord, whatever, like wants to renovate or something, and everyone ended up moving out. So a lot of times tenants are just like, well, I gotta leave, and
Yeah.
it doesn't even need to be necessarily all by the books, I guess. But it's as long as that landlord's willing to give the notice, I guess.
Not everyone has a landlord or a lawyer father waiting
Yeah,
to advise them
exactly.
against it, right? There's a certain percentage that you're just going to get stuck with. But
Yeah.
as
But I
you said,
think like MLS deals, it's more about understanding the potential for the property. And that's
yeah,
why there are still deals sitting on the MLS. People just don't understand that you could add a bedroom here, or you could up the rents a lot, way higher than they currently are. Or I don't know, or just the potential to, figure out what the after repair value could be on these things and refinance them. Like there are deals sitting on the MLS that just people don't recognize them as deals, I think is the big thing.
that's
Um,
that's very valuable though.
yeah.
The fact that you're able to see the value that others can't.
Yeah, the number of properties that other people have walked through, they're like, "You bought that," and then I'm like, "Yeah," and then a few months later, they're like, "Holy shit! Like that's cash flowing really well," or like the numbers turned out really well on that, and they look back and wonder why they didn't buy it too. Like over and over, a lot of the properties I bought look that way.
So are you just kind of going in within your head, this is a market rent for a 1 bed in this area. This is a market rent for a 2 bed in this area.
Yep.
And then whatever it is, you say, well, even if I can get half the turnover, do you work backwards on a spreadsheet to see what that would be worth? Or do you just kind of have a feeling?
It's honestly, at first I did a lot of spreadsheeting, and I recommend that early on because you get to know the numbers well. At some point, you become proficient with it to the point where your gut kind of tells you what the numbers are like good enough that you understand it's going to work. So yeah, you understand what the potential rent would be. In these properties I'm putting in, I'm always adding in as often as possible, adding in-suite laundry.
Okay.
I know that this one property has separate meters, so I can understand what the potential is going to be for rent, and then understand what I'm willing to pay, and then like I said, yeah, you need to understand what the potential for that property is, and then what the potential after repair value is, and just analyze it like any other deal. But some people just aren't willing to take on the headaches, and they walk through the property and things scare them and they just leave. Right? That's I think the thing. Like a tipping point could be if you walk through with a bunch of other people and they walk out and they're like, wow, that property was a shit show or whatever. Like there's a chance that there's probably something there, right? Or at least it's worth tossing in a low offer and seeing what happens.
So you're saying smelly is better?
Yeah. It smells like, cat pee smells like money, right?
Smells like money. Yeah, I love that expression. I don't think that in my head, I'm like, are people really that naive that they can't get past the smell? But I think
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, now you need to take that a step further and see past the current tenants and see past all of the shit that they have in the unit and see past the shitty cabinets and all that stuff. Like understand that, like,
replace those. Yeah.
right. Look at the foundation, look at the current layout of the unit, look at the space you have available, look at the roof and furnace and whatever, understand what the bones of the property are, and then figure out how you could lay it out differently and what the potential rent could be. figure out what that's going to cost you to renovate, and then figure out if it makes sense as a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, you talked about for private deals. So yeah, I think that's a common question is like, how are you finding the private deals, right? Like people are always wondering. And for me, there's no one answer, but I do have a bunch of things I've tried. So one of them is just offering finder's fees, making sure that people know that you're willing to pay $1,000 finder's fee if they pass you along the phone number of a landlord and you end up closing on that property. So almost anyone I talk to, especially in my neighborhood, because I focus usually on a specific neighborhood here in London.
Soho?
What's that? Actually, Old East Village mostly.
East Village? Okay.
And then I do have 2 properties in Soho.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just tell everyone, contractors, your pest control guy, everyone, like anyone who's like in these properties all the time, property managers, I'm willing to pay $1,000 if you just pass me the phone number of a landlord and I end up buying that property.
Yeah.
So I've paid a few finder's fees. People think of you. You become top of mind when there's a property that someone's like, I wonder if the owner would be willing to sell, or the owner actually indicates that they're ready to sell. Call me first, right? And people love to sell privately because they don't have to pay realtor commissions. And oftentimes I think they think they're getting more than market value when realistically they're probably getting less.
Yeah. And how do you have that conversation with them? You get into the room and how do you stop them? Because almost every time I've been in this scenario, unless they absolutely had a reason they couldn't list, they've always said, well, I just want to talk to my realtor first. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, I think most of these people, a lot of them don't want to go with a realtor. So I think, I don't know, maybe I've been lucky in that way. Like most of the people I'm buying from want to sell privately. So they're not saying they want to talk to the realtor, or maybe they just want to they'll pull comps or something. Like they have a realtor to figure out what the comparable values in their neighborhood are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you just tell them, okay, like in that scenario, I'd probably just say, okay, like you're probably paying $10,000, $15,000 in commission. Like if you're happy to work with a realtor on that and you want to put it on the MLS, you can, but I'm willing to buy it right now as is. You don't have to do any more work. I'll assume the tenants, whatever you want to do to to get that property, just make it easy as you can. I can close quickly,
So, and you can even go further. And my friend has closed a ton of private deals, and he'd say, yeah, you're going to pay a commission. And then of course the buyers can come in, they're going to do an inspection with a home inspector. They could find things. I'm not doing any of that. I've already seen your property. I'm good with it because I know I can handle those things as they come up. Not everybody is like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Value in that way. Yeah, I've heard that before. So that's pretty cool that you say something similar along those lines.
Just make it easy on them, right? And like most of these people I get together for coffee with when I'm making the offer, or like, I have a good conversation with them. I think it's about building rapport with these people as well. You want them to trust you, and like there's good reason for them to trust you because you've done other deals like this before. When you've done a couple, at that point you're like, you could literally call this Joe and like, this is the guy I bought a property off of, and we''ve structured a deal in a similar way, and you can ask him his experience, right? You have references, other people you've bought from privately. I haven't done that actually. Well, I have done that once. But yeah, it's just build rapport with people. Like I said, get together for them or with them for coffee, and just explain. A lot of times these people just don't want to pay commission, right?
That's great. That's great though. I mean, I love that. I got to get on that a little bit more. I've never really done that. And I think it's because we talked about this earlier in our podcast here. Just kind of, basically finding deals and finding, you make it when you buy, like you get a really good deal. I think in general, in the past, I haven't really got that good of deals, but I've created the value in what I've done to the property, right? Seeing that value that maybe others wouldn't have seen or would never have planned to do what I did.
Oh yeah. Who would have done a 6-bed, 6.5 bath in this property, right? Like, you have the potential that like other people might have just like put some paint on it, right?
Right. Yeah. Where people couldn't wrap their head around that. Whereas I'm on the spreadsheet saying, well, if this rent can be created, then this value should be created. And on that one that you mentioned there, like I got $860 a bedroom when there was no precedent for that. Like originally I started at $750, which I knew was achievable. Never dreamed I'd get $860 a bedroom. But that's a $660 lift on my rent. So as of May 1st, my cash flow on one property goes up $660. Just
amazing.
Yeah.
I love how you set it up as a bidding war. We talked about this a little bit before. That's incredible. And I've done similar things. Like when the rental demand is strong right now, we're in a really lucky position, right? When you list a unit and you're getting 100 replies to it,
Yeah.
you listed it a little bit low, and like maybe the demand's a little higher than you thought, at which point you can reach back out to the people who are interested and say, the demand has been overwhelming. The unit is now this much a month. It's a little bit more. Are you still interested? And then the people that are, you can show them the unit and then continue on, and that's your new rent.
So I'll tell this story, and just because it got brought up. So when I did it, I think I ticked a few people off, which I think maybe is inevitable if you do this strategy, but I don't think that makes it wrong. It just, some people are naturally very cheap and they get upset when prices change. So one thing you could do to header this off is on your ad, put price subject to change without notice.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, just say price subject to change without notice based on demand. People would kind of breeze over it, but then if they ever have an issue, you can always come back to that. Hey guys, it was right.
I like that. Yeah.
The next thing to do is have an open house. That's what I did. So I held an open house on a Sunday. I had like hundreds of replies. I had 20 different groups of like 6 people come through. So this house was like packed. So I would do every 10, 15 minutes was a 15, which was way too tight. I did it over the course of an hour and 15 minutes. Had the group, 5 groups in, filled the entire living room, kitchen, give them the spiel and said, like, guys, you can see the amount of interest there is. Based on the amount of interest I've had, what I'm doing is I'm allowing people to make me an offer. And if you're interested in the place, we have comps in the area. There's other stuff like there are other properties that have rented for $750, and they're in inferior locations. Reasonably, I feel like this one's going to go for around $850. I just put that number out there.
Nice.
I think it's going to go for $850, but I don't know. I'm just saying, make me an offer with what you're comfortable with. That's cool. So I'd say about like probably 60, 75% of them were good with what I said. The other 25 like hated me for doing it and like, oh, we wasted our time.
Yeah.
Like, what was your odds of getting the property anyway? There are literally 20 groups here that all are like saying, can we just sign a lease right now? They're like pulling me aside. Oh, we just want to sign a lease right now.
Wow. That's crazy. I love that. Like, people have talked about the open house, and I think in a scenario like that, it's incredible. And I should give it a try, because the way I do it currently is I do the 15-minute intervals as well. So book, 2 hours on like a Saturday from like whatever, 10 to 12 or whatever. And then I'll show one person at a time every 15 minutes. And, it's batched. It's nice. It doesn't take too much of my time, but I can have a conversation and really get to know the tenants, because in my neighborhood, in the old East Village, the quality of tenants can be really good or really not good. So it's especially important to screen in that case. So if you have a student rental and that kind of thing, I mean, generally students are students. Like your quality of tenants is going to be pretty similar regardless.
Well, I was already in a really high price point. Like $750 a bedroom was already super high. So some people that were stretching just to come there, like, is there any flex? I'm like, there will probably be flex, but it's going to be upward.
Like it'll flex up.
It's going to flex up, not down. I'm sorry. We have way too much demand. But yeah, so different scenario, but for me, I just laid out, okay, so if you're interested, here's what you need to do next. And I'd actually have a sheet for them, and it explained what they were to do next. And then I'm like, so send me the email by this date, and then I'll basically announce who's got it. And they had to like say who they were, who's in the group, why they wanted the place.
You're still screening. Yeah,
still screening in the process, but then they, their money's where their mouth is. And I ended up getting a bunch of private school kids, from Vancouver and Oakville, like coming from money. And if people who've been following me know, I go for the high-end stuff. Like, not like I came from a high-end family. I didn't, but I just like that tenant base. Cause I know I grew up like the kind of the cheap person that wanted the cheapest. And I knew what I got with that. But then I knew when at the school I went to, Western, people come, their parents pay the bill and they don't care. They just want a nice place. So there's a delicate balance there, of course, but I generally find the ones that their parents are paying the bill, they'll find a way to convince mom and dad to pay an extra $200 a month. Which I love. That
it's negligible, right? Their parents are doctors and lawyers and whatever. Like,
what do they care? Extra $200, right? So I just love that. So for a demographic, for affordability, I like that. But I mean, your method where you're kind of getting a more of a middle class rental, I like that too. And I think there's a really nice diversity that you have in your portfolio, which I'd like to add to mine, where I've got some multifamilies. I'm not all dependent on one type of tenant.
Yes. Yeah. Every unit's different. The screening process is different. I have to be pretty careful about how I'm doing my screening. So it's really important for me to have that conversation, often a 10-minute conversation with them while they're in the unit. I can talk to them. They can really get comfortable and understand. And then I can feel like for me, it's really about understanding, does this feel like a good fit for them? Because if it doesn't, it feels like maybe they're willing to pay more or whatever, but it just doesn't feel like a good fit for them, then it's not worth it, right? you know,
Yeah.
they're wanting to leave in a year or less or whatever they do.
Yeah.
So like, just make sure it feels right for them. And then, you know, it should work out in the long run.
Yeah, if I were doing what you're doing, I'd probably be more on the same page. Like I just want to know that the person I'm getting in, I have a
Yeah.
good gut feel about them and it feels like it's a good fit. Like you said,
Yeah.
you're getting a number you're happy with, you know that's a good market rent.
Yeah.
I think that I'd be much more on the same page. And with my family rentals, I've taken more of that approach.
Yeah, and like for a lot of mine, you'd literally have to do it as one at a time because there's like I have a bachelor unit that's 224 square feet. It's
Holy.
tiny.
It's a
It's not as
hotel
bad
room.
as it sounds. Like when you go in it, you're like, this is functional. Like,
Yeah.
but it's a small unit, and like you couldn't do an open house in that. It'd be absurd.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so man, that's pretty cool. Your story, 31 units in 2.5 years.
Yeah, 32 units. Yeah, my ego.
32. Oh shit, sorry. 32 units in a year, 2.5 years,
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's all been about like recycling your money. So like,
right? You
yes,
go in, you renovate, you re-rent, you refinance it, and then
yeah.
you just take that money and you do it over and over again. That's
Yeah.
the key to growth.
Yep, and there's various ways to do that. If you're dealing with like traditional method, you could do a purchase, or sorry, you could do just buy it and literally do it like the renos and then actually do a full refinance. There's purchase plus improvements. So different banks have like little programs where you can tell them how much you're going to spend, and then they say, okay, if you spend $30,000 or $40,000, we can see how the property now would be worth $240,000 after the renovation. And then maybe you get it done for a little bit less and you still get the 40,000 back. So there's ways to kind of get a little bit of your money back out of the deal.
We should do a creative financing episode. That'd probably be another whole episode for sure.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely have to get on that on one of these. Okay, one takeaway from your real estate investing career so far that you think is most valuable?
Networking is the big thing. Yeah, like stands out as like I got all of my value just from being surrounded by the right people, and then having like, I hate using the word mentor, but like just having people that are like a few steps ahead of you or wait a lot of steps ahead of you, and having people to look up to, and having people there to ask questions to. So I always tell people, wherever you are, look for the networking group in your city, and if it doesn't exist, that's your opportunity to create it. If you can become the hub of a network, the value is like immeasurable. We have like our meetup groups here in London, and like, just being one of the people that's kind of the founder of the group, and you're introducing the guests and you're kind of standing up at the front, there's legitimacy to that. And I don't have anything to sell and I'm not pitching anything, but like, just having that legitimacy is there. If you need to borrow some private money at some point, or people want to joint venture with you or whatever, like at this point now, and like, there's a ton of people who are like, I'd love to joint venture. And like, it's, I think like just, yeah, being the center of a network can be a really valuable thing. So if you don't have a network, start one up. Go on meetup.com and create a group, create a Facebook group, meet up every month. Even if it's only a few people, it'll eventually grow.
That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, just to, kind of put the word out there. And then people are reaching out to me on Instagram, and if they're in the area, that is my goal, is to eventually start a meetup in the Hamilton area, because there's lots of groups that meet, but I don't always find that they're with people that are doing stuff. It's more like, this is an education training program that, or it's a paid meeting. No, I like the one where you go, you sit down and you have a beer maybe, and you chat.
It's always very informal.
Yeah.
Like it all started with actually Bigger Pockets. And I think that's a really good way to start. It's like, go on Bigger Pockets, see if there's a group already. If not, maybe start one on Bigger Pockets. And then anyone who's following has the tag for, Hamilton, Ontario, they're going to see, hey, they're starting a meetup group, and then they'll come out. Yeah. It's so valuable. Like, just having people to, when you're stuck and you have questions and you don't know what to do, you need people that you can just fire a message off to, and they'll get back to you. They've done it before. It expedites things like crazy. So the number of people now who are doing similar strategies to what I'm doing, and I like, a lot of what I've done is just taking what Matt McKeever has done and copying a lot of it. So it's just having people who've done this before and just replicating their strategies, doing your best to improve on it. I know that people are going to do what I'm doing, are going to find ways to improve on it. So like, you can stand on the shoulder of giants and get things done faster than the people did before you.
Yeah. Just don't try and recreate the wheel. Well said.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So Kellen, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do so?
I would say Instagram is probably the best thing. So it's just KELLAN.PAN. So Kellan.pan on Instagram. Yeah, that's probably the best way. I mean, I don't accept a lot of Facebook invites because I don't know who a lot of these people are, but shoot me a DM on Instagram is probably the best way.
Awesome. Thanks. And okay, so rapid fire questions. I know you're vegan. I also eat completely vegan.
Oh, nice. I don't think I knew. Maybe I did know that. I don't know if I knew that.
It's a small vegan investor community. I feel like that's growing.
You know what? It's really weird. So I can name. So we got Dan Warren, we got me, we got Angie Fiavoli, we've got Matt McKeever, Matt Pichet. There's probably a whole bunch of others, and like the number of plant-based in real estate investors named Matt is really weird. I can name a few others as well that you guys wouldn't know, but there's something about that. When you have those few things in common, like the number of other things you end up having in common is really weird.
It is odd. I feel like it's like a kind of thinking outside the box thing. I know that's a tangent conversation. But anyways, so favorite food. There was a point to that. Yeah, favorite food.
Probably recently it's been smoothie bowls. So I mean, if you follow me on Instagram, it's gonna be real estate stuff and smoothie bowls. So
I actually did see that. Where do you get them?
What's that?
Where do you get them?
I make them. Yeah, it's just like a Vitamix or whatever, right? Like bananas, blueberries, and then like a bunch of healthy like fats and stuff like that. Yeah, I love it.
Nice. And I guess dream vacation you may have already told me, but
yeah. My vacations are always like adventurous. So I don't necessarily want to sit on the beach. I find when I do that, I just get kind of like lazy, and then I come back and I have to go on this stupid airplane. I get back all stressed out. So I'd rather go to like, for me actually, like Algonquin Provincial Park, backpacking, that kind of stuff is my favorite. And then I'm going to try this van trip out and see how that goes.
And one weird fact about yourself, or interesting works too.
That's interesting. I can't think of anything. I'm not interested. What have other people said? What have other people answered before?
They haven't. You're the first one I've asked the question.
I'm the first. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. No pressure.
It's not your question. That's a flop. It's my answer. I play guitar and sing. I haven't been doing enough of that. I had shoulder surgery recently, so it's been.
That's a cool fact, man.
Cool fact. I had shoulder surgery.
Why'd that happen?
I was a football injury from high school, and I just like took 12 years before I finally decided I want to get the thing fixed.
I actually play guitar and sing too. Isn't it weird? It's just so many weird similarities.
There's more, man. There's more. When you sit down and hang out with these people, like, like when we went to Vegas for an event that Matt put on, and like when you sit down and you start realizing you have a lot in common with these people, like there's like a certain mentality, and then it just, you end up with all these weird things in common. Yeah.
It's cool though. I haven't met most of these people, and it's just geographic difference, which I got to get over.
Yes, you do. Like the value. I know that like you have a ton of value in your life already with what you're doing, but the value of meeting up with these people and the networking is like honestly incredible. Yeah. No, I want to meet. I haven't met you in person yet, so I look.
We might have, but it was. It was a while back. But no, absolutely. If there's something to come up in the next little bit, if I can make it, just let me know. I'd definitely like to connect more, and we'll go from there.
I will, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really interesting. I know we ran a little bit long, but I think there was a lot of gold in there. So appreciate it. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Kellen.
Thank you.
Just for a few closing thoughts based on today's conversation with Kellen. One of the things that I wanted to draw out from the discussion was buying properties that have future potential value, even if it's not instant future potential. So that's things like buying properties with many units that are under rented. Even if you can't get the tenants out now, you can get them out down the road. Also, I like buying properties that have a lot of extra land, because you never know what bylaws will change in the future, what developers might come into your community. And if zoning changes, maybe your property could be used for an apartment building, and it might be a really amazing opportunity to cash out. So just a little tidbit, long-term planning. If you found this episode valuable, share it with a friend. If you haven't already, go ahead and connect with me on Instagram at @theandrewhines. And thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. It means the world to me for those of you who are listening to every episode. And I really do hope that we can connect one day and continue to build an investor community around this show. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next one.